So help me understand where you're coming from in this case. Why did you conclude that religious people could be singled out for disfavor? Just help me explain. The Supreme Court took a totally different view. Help me explain how you looked at the same Constitution and came to a totally different conclusion. Why is it okay to single out religious people for disfavor? I don't understand it. He issued an order that allowed essential businesses and operations to operate at 50% capacity, but it applied only to secular institutions and services. He explicitly said religious activity was subject to a different rule. Religious activity, churches, synagogues, could only have 10 people in them. Everybody else, all other essential services, could have 50%, so hundreds of people go shopping, whatever. But religious activity, only 10 people or fewer for those folks. Different rule, explicitly different rule.
Senator Josh Hawley was not going to let this one slide. In one of the most explosive Senate confirmation hearings in recent memory, Hawley methodically challenged a judicial nominee who once ruled it was constitutionally acceptable for a state governor to cap church attendance at 10 people while allowing hundreds of shoppers into stores at 50% capacity. This was not grandstanding. This was not political theater. This was a senator doing exactly what the American people sent him to Washington to do, fighting for the forgotten, standing up for the faithful, and refusing to allow a judicial nominee to waltz into a lifetime appointment on the back of a ruling that treated Christians, Jews, and every other person of faith as second-class citizens in their own country, while governors were letting hundreds of shoppers roam freely through shopping centers, while businesses operated at 50% capacity, while secular life continued largely uninterrupted. Churches were told, 10 people, and not one more. Let's dive in.
You are committed to the Constitution, I assume. Is that fair to say?
That is fair, Senator.
And to the Bill of Rights?
Yes.
And do you think the Bill of Rights is deeply important to our foundation of government? Is that fair to say?
I do.
And the Equal Protection Clause as well. Is that fair to say?
Yes, Senator.
And the Constitution doesn't contain an emergency powers exception, does it? An emergency exception? Can it be suspended in the case of an emergency?
There is nothing explicitly in the Constitution that provides any sort of suspension during cases of emergency.
Can the Bill of Rights be suspended during an emergency?
There is nothing in the Constitution that provides for that.
What about the Equal Protection Clause? Can it be suspended during an emergency? Government disfavor a certain group of people because it's convenient for the government?
Again, Senator, there's nothing in the Constitution that provides for that.
Okay, help me then understand your opinion in the Cassell case. This is about Governor Pritzker in your state, his orders, or within your jurisdiction, his stay-at-home order during the COVID-19 pandemic. He issued an order that allowed essential businesses and operations to operate at 50% capacity, but it applied only to secular institutions and services. He explicitly said religious activity was subject to a different rule. Religious activity, churches, synagogues, could only have 10 people in them. Everybody else, all other essential services, could have 50%, so hundreds of people go shopping, whatever. But religious activity, only 10 people or fewer for those folks. Different rule, explicitly different rule. You upheld that in the Cassell case, this differing standard that singled out religious people for disfavor, and you said that the Supreme Court of the United States has said that different rules apply during pandemics. The strange thing is I'm reading the case on which you relied, and it says nothing of the sort. You cite Jacobson versus Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That's a 1905 case. You say that the Jacobson court explained that the traditional tiers of constitutional scrutiny do not apply. That phrase doesn't appear anywhere in that opinion. Tiers of scrutiny weren't invented by the Supreme Court for another 40 years. So help me understand where you're coming from in this case. Why did you conclude that religious people could be singled out for disfavor?
Thank you, Senator Hawley, for that question. As I stated previously, when I decided the Cassell case, which was later affirmed by the Seventh Circuit, it was early on in the pandemic, and we did not have the benefit of the various other rulings by the Supreme Court that came down after my ruling on Cassell.
That held just the opposite.
That I guess I'm referring to Roman Catholic as well as Camden.
Right, in which the Supreme Court held that you could not single out religious people for disfavor. State of New York tried to do precisely the same thing. And the Supreme Court said, actually plaintiffs have a strong likelihood of success on the merits. You said they have no likelihood of success on the merits. So just help me explain. The Supreme Court took a totally different view. Help me explain how you looked at the same Constitution and came to a totally different conclusion. Why is it okay to single out religious people for disfavor? I don't understand it.
What I looked at was whether or not the Governor Pritzker's order was neutral and generally applicable. To decide whether, at that time, secular activities were generally applicable, I looked at the type of activities as well as kind of the sort of risks, the varying degree of risks that were present in those instances. So, for example,
well, can I just stop you right there? I'm sorry, I've only
Yes.
got 1 minute left. I'm sorry, but you've raised, I think, a really important point, because the standard is, when it comes to First Amendment violations, is the law neutral and generally applicable? This regulation wasn't neutral and generally applicable. It had one set of rules for shops, businesses, and a completely different set of rules for churches, which is, of course, what the U.S. Supreme Court ruled. I don't understand how you can look at that and say it's neutral and generally applicable.
The order, as I recall, also closed, for example, movie houses and auditoriums, as well as schools. And so when I considered the activities at movie houses and schools compared to activities carried out at churches, I found those to be, at the time, using the time pre-Tandon test, to be generally comparable or comparable. I agree, and I found that
But the order said that religious houses of worship were essential. So it said that essential businesses could be open, essential services, but at 50%. Initially, it didn't include any carve-out for any acknowledgement that religious services might be essential. He amended that, said, no, they are essential, but I'm going to cap them. So two completely different rules.
Look, what America witnessed in that hearing room was not simply a senator questioning a judicial nominee. What America witnessed was a man of conviction standing in the gap for every pastor who had to turn his congregation away at the door, for every family that could not gather to worship together, for every believer who watched in confusion and heartbreak as the government told them their faith was less essential, less valuable, and less worthy of protection than a trip to the shopping mall. Senator Josh Hawley did not have to go that deep. He did not have to read the Jacobson case line by line. He did not have to walk that nominee through the very words of the Constitution she had sworn to uphold. He could have asked a few soft questions, checked a box, and moved on like so many others do. But he did not, because some fights are worth having, because some truths are worth speaking even when the room is uncomfortable, because the American people of faith deserve at least one senator who will look a judicial nominee in the eye and say plainly, and without apology, what you did was wrong. And it was wrong. It was wrong when Governor Pritzker issued that order. It was wrong when the courts upheld it, and it was wrong for a nominee seeking elevation to a higher court to sit before the United States Senate and struggle to explain why singling out religious Americans for stricter treatment was somehow consistent with a Constitution that guarantees every citizen equal protection under the law. The Supreme Court of the United States, the highest judicial authority in this nation, looked at the exact same issue and reached the exact opposite conclusion. Churches cannot be targeted. Faith cannot be penalized. The First Amendment does not take a leave of absence during a pandemic. Senator Hawley knew that. He proved it, and he made sure it was on the record forever. There is something deeply important about what courage looks like in a Senate hearing room. It does not always look like raised voices or dramatic gestures. Sometimes courage looks like a senator sitting quietly with a stack of case law, asking precise and uncomfortable questions, and refusing to accept non-answers when the Constitution is on the line. That is exactly what Hawley brought to that hearing. Quiet, methodical, constitutional courage. The kind that does not flinch when a nominee pushes back. The kind that does not soften its conclusions to spare anyone's feelings. The kind that says, I have read the case you cited, and it does not say what you claim it says, and then reads it aloud for all of America to hear.